the autumn of 2021, a dedicated group of Finnish wildlife scientists stood captivated by an astonishing sight along a riverbank in a secluded corner of eastern Finland. What they witnessed defied all conventional wisdom. Just weeks prior, the Kangaskoski Dam, a colossal concrete barrier that had submerged this segment of the Hitojoki River since 1925, had been brought down. The demolition debris had barely been cleared, and heavy construction equipment still dotted the landscape. Yet, in the newly exposed, turbulent currents below, Atlantic salmon were already meticulously crafting their spawning nests. These were wild, landlocked Atlantic salmon, Finland's most imperiled migratory fish, now excavating gravel beds that had languished beneath stagnant reservoir waters for nearly a century. Females fanned their tails against stones untouched by the flow of fresh water since before the outbreak of the Second World War. Before the final stages of the restoration project were even complete, 5 distinct spawning nests had been unequivocally confirmed. Such rapid resurgence had been utterly unforeseen. 2 additional dams remained standing upstream. When these barriers were subsequently removed in 2022 and 2023, the unfolding events became even more extraordinary. By 2024, electrofishing surveys conducted at Kangaskoski revealed densities of wild salmon fry ranging from 200 to 400 per 100 square meters. The lead biologist, a veteran of countless river assessments, stated he had never encountered such figures anywhere in his extensive career, not from fish hatcheries nor from artificial stocking efforts. These were truly wild fish, born in rapids that had been non-existent a mere 3 years earlier. This narrative unveils how Finland systematically dismantled every dam along its final wild salmon river, and how the salmon, relying solely on gravel, current, and primordial instinct, transformed scientific understanding of the speed with which a long dormant river can burst back to life. Prior to the construction of these dams, the Hitojoki was a force of nature, both untamed and beautiful. Its journey spans 53 kilometers from Lake Simpelhavi in southeastern Finland, traversing the Russian border before culminating in Lake Loga, the largest lake on the European continent. On the Finnish side, the river's length was a modest 8 kilometers. However, within this constricted stretch, the river plummeted 18 meters, creating a formidable cascade of white water that thundered over ancient granite boulders, carving its path through the dense boreal forest en route to the national boundary. For millennia, since the retreat of the last glacial epoch, landlocked Atlantic salmon had navigated these very rapids. They reproduced in the crisp, oxygen-rich gravel beds nestled between the falls. Their offspring matured in the sheltered pockets behind submerged rocks, sustaining themselves on the myriad invertebrates carried by the current. NC sufficiently strong, the young salmon migrated downstream to Lake Loga to forage and grow. When their biological imperative to reproduce awakened, sometimes years later, they returned with unerring precision to the exact rapids of their birth. These are not common fish. Landlocked salmon represent a unique freshwater variant of the Atlantic salmon, isolated within lake systems following the last ice age. Over countless centuries, they evolved to complete their entire life cycle without ever venturing into the ocean. Each distinct population possesses an irreplaceable genetic blueprint, finely honed by the specific temperature, chemical composition, flow dynamics, and geological features of its ancestral river. When such a landlocked population vanishes, its genetic legacy is irretrievably lost. It cannot be replenished by introducing fish from a different watershed. This adaptation is the river itself, etched into their very genome over millennia. The Hitojoki population stood as one of the last remaining such groups in Finland. Crucially, on the Finnish side, those 8 kilometers of rapids harbored something unparalleled in the nation. Finland's last remnant of truly wild, pristine, landlocked Atlantic salmon. In the early years of the 20th century, 3 hydroelectric dams were erected across the Finnish sector of the river. Kangaskoski, the lowest, saw its completion in 1925. Lenajamäki, the middle dam, and the oldest of the trio, was constructed in 1911 to supply power to a local paper mill. Riitakoski, situated furthest upstream, was finalized in 1921. Collectively, these structures obstructed the river's entire 18-meter descent. The once thundering rapids were transformed into a series of placid, silent reservoirs. Vital spawning grounds were submerged, and critical migratory pathways were completely severed. The electrical output from these dams was minuscule, a mere fractional contribution to Finland's national grid. As the nation progressed through the 20th century, developing nuclear power plants, expanding wind energy infrastructure, and modernizing its entire energy system, the Hitojoki dams gradually became anachronisms, enduring testaments to a mindset that viewed rivers as mere conduits and aquatic life as acceptable collateral damage. They continued to generate negligible power while systematically bringing about the demise of the country's last wild salmon population. The effort required to dismantle them, and the individuals who championed their removal, tell a story that nearly never materialized. Bringing down these dams demanded decades of political conviction that, for a long time, simply did not exist. Hydropower, even in its marginal forms, held significant symbolic weight in Finland. Dams were perceived as emblems of progress, national energy autonomy, and modernity. To dismantle a single one felt akin to conceding an error. To remove three was considered practically sacrilegious. The campaign to liberate the Hitojoki commenced in the 1990s, when the World Wildlife Fund in Finland provided financial support for the removal of existing barriers on the Russian side of the border, thereby opening up the lower river sections. Almost immediately, salmon began appearing at the foot of the Kangaskoski Dam on the Finnish side, offering irrefutable evidence that wild fish still persisted, relentlessly striving to access the spawning grounds that had been locked away by concrete for generations. They gathered at the threshold of a home they could sense, but not reach. Regional fisheries authorities initiated a legal process, demanding the installation of fish ladders at all three dams. These proceedings protracted for an entire decade. Yet they precipitated an unforeseen outcome. The power utility companies, faced with the substantial costs of retrofitting their aging infrastructure with fish passes that might not even prove effective, chose to sell. Between 2000 and southeastern and 2019, the Recreation Area Foundation of Southern Karelia successfully acquired all three hydroelectric facilities. Funding for this ambitious undertaking originated from an extraordinary alliance, encompassing the Finnish Ministry of Agriculture, the World Wildlife Fund, various private foundations, the municipality of Ruokolahti, several forest companies, and numerous individual benefactors. The outdoor equipment manufacturer Patagonia also contributed. Prominent Finnish actor Jasper Pakkanen, an ardent angler who had advocated passionately for the river's cause for years, played a crucial role in connecting the project with international media outlets and additional funding sources. The objective behind each acquisition remained steadfast. Not mere retrofitting, not the addition of fish passes, but complete demolition. This distinction holds immense significance. Fish ladders and fish passes, often presented as the conventional compromise between electricity generation and fish migration, possess a regrettably inconsistent efficacy record. Numerous studies conducted across Europe have demonstrated that even optimally engineered passes permit only a small fraction of migratory fish to traverse them successfully. For landlocked salmon, a species that necessitates unrestricted movement between rapids and lakes multiple times throughout its life cycle, partial passage is fundamentally inadequate as a solution. The sole method capable of fully restoring a river to its natural state is the complete elimination of the obstructing barrier. Finland opted for total removal. The Kangaskoski Dam was dismantled in August of 2021. As the lowest dam, it was the first to fall. The demolition engineering was executed with meticulous precision. A full century's worth of fine sediment had accumulated behind the structure, particles that, if unleashed in an uncontrolled deluge, could potentially smother the downstream gravel beds essential for salmon spawning. Consequently, the demolition was meticulously staged in carefully planned phases, regulating the precise manner and timing of each section's breach to manage sediment flow and safeguard water quality further downstream. The aim extended beyond simply removing concrete. It was to reawaken a river without inadvertently compromising its vitality in the process. Then, the river achieved something truly remarkable. It reclaimed its original gradient almost instantaneously. Water that had been held captive in sluggish pools for 100 years surged over newly exposed bedrock, naturally sorting gravel, carving out fresh channels, and recreating within weeks the intricate hydraulic architecture crucial for salmon reproduction. The river was not commencing from a blank slate. Its underlying bedrock remained. Its natural gradient persisted. The ancient geology that had sculpted these rapids since the close of the Ice Age lay intact beneath the former reservoirs. The river had no need to relearn how to be a river. It simply remembered. And within weeks, not months, not years, salmon were actively spawning within its newly freed waters. 5 nests were confirmed in the autumn of 2021. The local community of Ruokolahti, initially hesitant about the loss of a familiar local landmark, witnessed these dramatic results and rapidly shifted its perspective. Support for the removal of the remaining dams solidified. Lanayanosky came down in 2022. This middle dam, 8 meters tall, was the river's oldest hydroelectric plant, constructed in 1911, and it had retained almost all of its original equipment right up until the turn of the 21st century. Here, the narrative encounters a detail that borders on the extraordinary. Even amidst the demolition activities, with heavy machinery operating, temporary culverts diverting the flow, and construction noise reverberating through the valley, migrating salmon were observed upstream of the worksite. They had successfully navigated beyond the demolition zone, discovering a passage even before engineers had completed the removal of the structure. Weeks later, spawning nests materialized in the newly opened rapids. The fish were not passively awaiting completion. They moved the very instant the barrier yielded. Rytakoski, the uppermost dam, was removed in 2023. It represented the final obstruction on the Finnish section of the Hitojoki. Once more, salmon commenced spawning in the rapids before the restoration was officially declared finished. Accessible pathways and an elevated viewing bridge were subsequently constructed alongside the revitalized rapids, and the community was no longer opposed. They were observers, captivated by the spectacle. 3 dams, 3 years. 3 stretches of rapids, submerged since the 1920s, are now generating wild salmon at unprecedented rates that no one had dared to forecast. By 2024, the comprehensive electrofishing data unveiled the complete transformation. At Kangaskoski, fry densities soared to between 200 and 400 per 100 square meters in the most productive survey regions. The lead researcher, whose career had spanned decades of surveying Finnish waterways, affirmed he had never recorded such prolific numbers anywhere, not even in naturally spring-fed streams renowned for their exceptional productivity. The projected annual output for the restored Finnish sections, estimated at 5,000 to 11,000 migratory juveniles, now appears to be a readily achievable goal. This would effectively double the total landlocked salmon production for the entire Hitojoki ecosystem. A species teetering on the brink of eradication in Finland is now reproducing at unparalleled levels within a habitat that simply did not exist 4 years ago. Yet the salmon's recovery is merely the most overt manifestation of this resurgence. Beneath the surface, the river is meticulously reconstructing intricate biological systems that had been systematically dismantled for a century. When a dam submerges a river, its impact extends far beyond merely blocking fish. Stagnant water warms more rapidly, oxygen levels plummet, and fine sediments create a suffocating blanket over the riverbed, eradicating the gravel essential for invertebrate life. The vital seasonal flood pulses, which naturally scour riverbeds and deposit nourishing sediments onto floodplains, the very heartbeat of a thriving river, are suppressed into a monotonous, regulated flow. That dam, and every element of the ecosystem begins its re-establishment simultaneously. On the Hitojoki, the re-energized current is meticulously restoring rapid riffles, where mayfly and stonefly larvae can flourish, along with deep pools that serve as resting areas for adult fish between their forays. Gravel bars shift and reform with each season's floods, providing a constant supply of fresh spawning substrate year after year. Crucially, the salmon themselves are reigniting a nutrient cycle that had been broken for 100 years. Migratory fish function as essential biological transporters, feeding and growing in the lake, then carrying those vital nutrients back into the river when they return to spawn. Upon their demise after spawning, their bodies decompose within the rapids, enriching and fertilizing the entire riparian ecosystem. This critical nutrient link between lake and river, severed since the 1920s, is now being fully re-established. Freshwater pearl mussels, counted among Europe's most critically endangered invertebrates, are entirely dependent on salmon for their survival. Their larvae attach to the gills of migrating salmonids, developing there for several months before detaching to the riverbed to commence their adult lives. Without host fish, there is no reproduction. Without clean, flowing water, there is no survival. For the first time in a century, the Hitojoki now provides both conditions. Whether the pearl mussels will ultimately return remains an open question, but the necessary prerequisites for their re-establishment are now firmly in place. The Hitojoki is but one river. Across Europe, over 1.2 million barriers fragment its extensive waterways, averaging 0.74 barriers per kilometer. Many of these structures are small, obsolete, and serve no current purpose. They generate no electricity, offer no flood control, yet they persist, silently diminishing river connectivity year after year. As a tragic consequence, migratory freshwater fish populations across Europe have witnessed a devastating 93% decline since 1970. However, the tide of change is now undeniably shifting. In 2023, Europe achieved a record-breaking removal of 487 barriers, representing a 50% increase over the preceding year. France is actively demolishing dams on the Salmon River to facilitate the restoration of Atlantic salmon. Estonia's removal of the Sindi Dam has reopened over 3,000 kilometers of vital waterway. The European Union has set an ambitious target of restoring 25,000 kilometers of free-flowing rivers by 2030. The compelling evidence emerging from every river where barriers have been removed consistently points in the same direction. These ecosystems possess far greater resilience than previously assumed. They rebound with astonishing speed, much faster than anyone had predicted. They were, in essence, waiting. Yet no river in Europe has demonstrated such immediate and dramatic results as those witnessed on the Hitojoki. For more than a century, this river lay silenced, its powerful rapids submerged, its iconic salmon population confined behind concrete structures that yielded almost nothing while irrevocably destroying something precious. Then, 3 dams fell, one in 2021, another in 2022, and the final one in 2023. The river, with its renewed flow, instinctively sorted its own gravel. The salmon discovered it within mere weeks. Fry densities achieved levels never before recorded in Finnish history. A species believed to be running out of time proved, in fact, that it was merely running out of space. The very instant that space was restored, life surged back with explosive vitality. The Hitojoki did not require rebuilding, it simply needed to be set free. The fundamental question is no longer whether dam removal is effective. This river has definitively answered that. The pressing inquiry now is how many of the 1.2 million barriers still standing across Europe are inflicting precisely the same harm, drowning rivers that would recover in a matter of months if humanity would simply step aside. To explore more stories of nature's remarkable capacity for recovery, consider subscribing to our channel.